So there are wider and more narrow definitions of open science. I think the most important part of open science is being able to follow the way that a researcher arrived at a conclusion, from all the way from the beginning to the end. So we need to know what data went into it, what methods, what analysis scripts, everything that basically led the person to believe what they claim in a paper. And that also includes the paper itself, of course. I'm not really sure how open science is at the moment, because I'm most familiar with certain fields, the fields that I work with, and well, I would say that in fact science is already pretty open in those fields. So people are happy to share data most of the time. They are happy to tell you what they've done most of the time. But so there is a great willingness to be open and to share data and to share methods and to work together to see if we can reach the same conclusions, so that we have a more strong confidence in the claims that are being made. But there's some, like I said, there's no real incentives to make all of these things a reality. So very often data are lost, or they get corrupted, or the scripts are not exactly as they were used in the paper, and it's not because people don't want to be open, but it's simply because studies take a while to get into the literature. And by the time I read them or somebody else reads them, it's maybe already 5 years ago that somebody did this study, and they don't remember exactly all the details. And so that's what I've found most problematic. So in one sense, science is already very open. People have this attitude because they are overwhelmingly good scientists who are doing their best to make believable claims in their field. But on the other hand, because of this, the incentives are not currently aligned with good practices in every aspect. Yeah, you can get some problems with obtaining data and methods and so on. That's my personal experience, but I want to stress that this is based on my personal experience, and I haven't studied it. There's actually a research field that studies this type of thing, sometimes called meta-research, and people who are in this field, they know a lot more about this question than I do. Of course, there's also concerns with open science, and specifically open science, even though it's simply good scientific practice in principle, in practice it's sometimes used almost as a weapon against people who draw conclusions that others don't like. For instance, climate change deniers have used it to discredit believable research on climate change. But it's also used against individuals to discredit their research, and sometimes, very unfortunately in my opinion, people who are in favor of open science and try to promote open science, they link it to things that have, in my opinion, nothing to do with open science, such as fraud or questionable research practices. For instance, the Berkeley Initiative for Transparency in the Sciences organizes a course on open science, and in this course they also mention fraud. I think that's a bad approach, because this way researchers will have negative associations with good practices, and that can never be the intention. Of course, there's also many instances where it's perfectly reasonable that some parts of the process cannot be open. For instance, if you are doing one-on-one interviews in anthropology, for instance, or in studying extremism, for instance, you don't want to publish all of those interviews, because that will reveal the identity of the person that you interviewed. And I don't have the solution to all of those problems, but I think there are very often already solutions to these problems. So the problem of privacy is very often played as a guard to claim that it's not possible to share data. And sometimes that is true, but my feeling is that it's true a lot less often than people think. There are now modern methods to protect data, both on a legal level, but also on a using statistical techniques. So that's something where I, as a statistician, have some expertise, and people like me can help. But that doesn't mean that there aren't any legitimate concerns. There are definitely legitimate concerns, and we should push for open science, but always with a view to making sure that all researchers can get behind it, so that it doesn't become a weight around their shoulders. That would be a bad development in open science. So I am in favor of open science because, like I said, I think it's just science. But the way in which we should improve has to be step by step and with careful consideration of the concerns of researchers in different fields. So I do have a message for researchers who might be thinking about open science for two groups of researchers. The first is the group of people who might be in doubt about whether it's feasible for them, whether it's applicable to them, and whether they might be slightly under attack in an unfair way for one reason or another. To this group, I would like to say, don't despair. Everybody just wants to make science better, just like you, and also trust that there are already a lot of solutions for the problems that you might be thinking about. For instance, data sharing and archiving of methods, privacy, and so on. So these are concerns, and changing of incentives. So these are all concerns that are being addressed in open science community, and they would like to hear from you. So don't be afraid to speak up as well. And to the other group of researchers, which is the group that's already very active in open science, and that might even be getting a little bit frustrated with how fast things are moving along, I would like to say, don't despair. While science is getting more collaborative and more large scale, it's inevitable that we will share more and more of our methods and data and so on. And what's important in moving open science along and making it better for all people, but also for our knowledge, is don't make open science into a moral issue. Make it into an issue of drawing the best conclusions that we can. And so that way we can all get there much more quickly together.